Hello, welcome to Gut Tales. I'm Emma, and today I'm going to talk about the time that I thought my life was over after my IBD diagnosis. So, I really thought about this today because today was the Army Navy game, and I went to the Naval Academy. And when I was at the Naval Academy, we always had to go to the Army Navy games once a year. And so, this really took me back to the time I was a midshipman, full of hopes and dreams, looking at my entire future ahead of me. And I just knew that I was going to make a career out of the military. I was going to be successful and my life was going to go how I'd planned it. I had worked so hard as a child, so hard as a teenager to get into the Naval Academy. I was very driven and I thought, no matter what, I'm going to work hard because hard work get me where I need to be until I got diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease. And then, no matter how much hard work you've done in the past, your entire life has changed. And at the time, I really struggled. So I was an officer in the Navy, and I got sick less than a year after I had graduated from the academy. And it was really surreal. I got sick in March. I ended up being diagnosed in April of 2006. I graduated in May of 2005. And so it really was a rough experience, but at the time I didn't understand the magnitude of IBD. I knew that my life had changed, and I knew that I had less than desirable symptoms, like not being able to control my bowels, having urgency issues, having to be very, very careful what I ate. But I didn't know that life as I knew it was changed forever. And it wasn't until I did a lot of self-research, because my gastroenterologist in the Navy did not tell me that inflammatory bowel disease is a lifelong chronic condition. So I thought I was going to take steroids. They were going to be a pill that would get me better, and then I would be on my way. And much to my surprise, and to my horror, that's not how it ended up being. And so I really, really struggled. I would get very sick. They'd put me on prednisone. I would, have an absence of symptoms. I would come off the prednisone. 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, I would start flaring again. And it was a very, very vicious cycle. But at first, they thought I had ulcerative pancreatitis. Later on, they thought, okay, you have Crohn's disease. Then they said, you have indeterminate colitis. We're not quite sure what it is, but we know it's inflammatory bowel disease. We just don't know if it's ulcerative colitis or if it's Crohn's disease, because your body is kind of giving us signals of both, so we don't know. So we will call it indeterminate. And I thought, okay. I can still continue on my career. I can still get where I need to be. It's just going to be hard, but I was used to the hard work, so it was fine until I had a capsule endoscopy, and they were able to diagnose with certainty that it was Crohn's disease. Oh my gosh. Well, Crohn's disease, if you don't know, in 2009, it was an automatic medical board, meaning that my case went to Washington, D.C. in front of officers, none of which were gastroenterologists, by the way. But they decided my fate, and they were like, this girl is too sick. She has Crohn's disease. She cannot be in the military. We're going to give her a medical discharge. And so that ended my career. It was over. And it was not anything that I expected. And it was very, very rough for me because I was married. My husband was a submarine officer, and how it was supposed to go was I was going to stay in the military. I would have kids. He would be the primary caregiver. And, that's how we were structuring or planning the future. And then everything changed. Pretty much one bloody bowel movement in the toilet, and that's all it took to change my entire life. That was my first symptom. I had bloody stool, which I ignored for a week before I went to the doctor. Please don't do that. If you have bloody stool, go see your doctor. It doesn't mean you have IBD, but it does mean something is not right in your colon, so you need to get that checked out. And I really struggled because my husband was a submariner, so we would go to officer events. I would go with him. I would see some of my classmates that I graduated with. And, it was hard for me to explain why I was no longer in the Navy. I was like, I have Crohn's disease. I got sick. It really sucks, but it is what it is. But for a long time, I felt lost, and I felt angry, and I felt like something was wrong with me. I felt like my husband married a quote unquote lemon, like he married me when I was healthy and fit and, making money and on my way. And then I broke. And so I really struggled with, a lot of self-worth issues, which looking back, I should not have, but I was not as empowered then as I am now. And so, the best advice I can give to those of you who either lost your job because of IBD, or you feel guilty because your partner has to be your caregiver a lot of the time, just know that this is all part of the journey, and it is rough and it really sucks sometimes. Like, I am not going to sugarcoat and say that it's been a fairy tale, because it has been anything but. I went through another cycle even this year, just really reflecting. I'm a graduate student getting a Master of Science in Nutrition Science. And I thought, well, if I never got sick and I would have been able to become a registered dietitian when I was in my mid to late 20s or even early 30s, I would be well established in my career by now. Or if I never got sick with IBD, I would be close to retirement in the military by now. I would be a senior officer. I would be in a way better place then than I am now, or whatever. And that's not the case, because that's not how life works. So I really, really had to reflect, and I had to look at all the blessings. What did IBD teach me? It taught me that life is more than your career. It is more than your sport. And I see this a lot with CrossFit athletes. They get so embedded in the ideology of CrossFit. They get obsessed with it. They, attach a lot of their self-worth to the sport. They're like, well, I'm a CrossFitter. I, hang out with my friends. This is my culture, which that's great. But if one of them breaks, what happens? If all you do is identify yourself as a certain thing, all you do is identify yourself as a career, all you do is identify yourself as a stay-at-home mom, all you do is identify yourself as, a successful CEO, whatever it is, and that's taken away in an instant, can you stand back and look at yourself in the mirror and still be comfortable with who you are? And it took me a long time to get to that point, because for the longest time, I wrapped myself up in, I'm an athlete, I am a cyclist, I am a competitive cyclist, I am a naval officer, I am all these things. And then it all got taken away in an instant. And I really struggled with that. But what I realized now, several years later, is that it turned out to be how it was supposed to be. IBD in a nutshell was a blessing. It's hard for me to say that, but I always try and look at the positives. If it wasn't for that, who knows? Would my husband and I have been stationed at the same place? I have no idea. Would I look at life with such fragility like I do now, or would I think I was bulletproof? Because I will tell you, before I was diagnosed with IBD, I thought I was unstoppable. I thought I was on top of the world. I thought I could do anything I wanted. And then all of a sudden I got diagnosed with a chronic disease in which I had no control over. And that was really, really hard. However, now, I'm used to things getting thrown at me that are unexpected. Like, they just took bone marrow out of my bone 3 days ago. Was it 3 days? Yes, it was 3 days ago. And that was really rough for me. And it messed my mental state up, because I'm used to digestive issues. I am not used to possible serious blood disorders, and I've never had something jammed into my bone to suck bone marrow out. That was, that was a rough procedure. And so I had a very emotional time, because it was like the weight of all of my IBD experience, the weight of, my career ending when I was 28 years old. The career that I had trained my entire life for was essentially taken away due to a diagnosis and a disease that I literally had no control of getting, and then the struggling to figure out where I fit in this life, because everything I had prepared for as a child and as a teenager was taken away, and I felt lost. However, now I realize that life is a blessing. Whatever season you're in, whatever is happening, if you wake up in the morning, it is a blessing, and you have to make it what it is. You have to accept it for what it is, and just don't fight, just exist it. Don't look at it as good or bad. It just is. And sometimes really, really shitty things happen, and there is nothing we can do about it. But if all we do is sit here and stir and wonder, what if I never got IBD? What if I was now a senior officer in the military? What if, my life plans worked out the way I thought they were going to? That doesn't matter, because it's useless. There is nothing I can do about my diagnosis. But what I can do is pave out my future. And so, I really thought my life was over when I was first diagnosed with IBD, when my career was taken away, everything I had worked towards was taken away. But I now realize my life hadn't even begun yet. And so that is what I realize all these years later, is that I have lived so much life from that point, from the point that my career was over in the military, from that point of when I was first diagnosed in 2006 to when I, was discharged from the military in 2008. Like, my life has changed so much since then. And I've lived a lot of life. I've birthed two children. I have, my husband is still in the military, so we still move around every 2 to 3 years. And it's hard. It's hard with IBD. It's hard reestablishing with doctors. Um, you know, but it just is what it is. And so please, no matter what, no matter how gloomy or bleak you think your future looks, I promise you that things will eventually get better. You just have to take it one day at a time. And you may not understand or see the full picture now, but I promise you, when you look back several years later, you will realize, this is just the path that was meant for me. And this is the steps I am taking one day at a time to get where I want to be. I really, when I was a young kid, that I call it, when I graduated from college, even in my 20s, like, nutrition science in general just wasn't my thing. But now, several years later, I love science. That is why I have gone back to school. It is not easy going to graduate school and having to do dietetic rotations with two small children, with not knowing when you're going to have to move next. That's not easy, but I'm so passionate about nutrition science and so passionate about being an IBD specific registered dietitian that I'm doing it because I love it. And I would have never thought, if you would have asked young me, the me newly diagnosed, the me before I was diagnosed, even the me after I was diagnosed, if I would have ever thought I would be doing a Master of Science program in nutrition science, having to take biochemistry, having to take a lot of the hard sciences, and then also that I would be conducting my own nutrition science research, looking at nutrition interventions and outcomes in IBD patients. If you would have asked me that years ago, I would have been like, of course not, going to do that. Are you kidding me? But now here I am. And what has brought me here is my diagnosis, the life that I've lived since my diagnosis, the struggles that I've had as a patient with nutrition and being taken advantage of by the wellness community, all these things, all of that life lived has taken me to this point. And I'm also at a point where I'm not wrapped up in, I don't identify with anything, because I also know that if something is taken away, you have to be able to stand there, like, and stare at yourself in the mirror and say, I still know who I am and I'm okay with that. And it took me several years to get that to that point. Eventually you will get to that point, but just know, just take it one step at a time, one day at a time. And no matter what, keep moving forward, because several years ago, when I was diagnosed in 2006, I thought my life was over. But now, here we are, gearing toward the end of 2024, and I had realized my life hadn't even really begun yet. And so every season is meant for something, right? And we may think that we know what our future holds, but we never really know. And that's why we must always remember that each day is a true gift. So I want to know what you all think. Please tell me your stories. I love interacting with you all in the comments. Feel free to, comment below, and I will be happy to correspond with you. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you have any ideas of future episodes that you'd like to see talk about, please let me know. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.